very quickly, then what I'll be discussing basically is the objective of the paper and the assumptions under which it was written, just highlighting some of them. I'll spend just a few minutes talking about basically the framework that I created of safety management systems, so then I could apply that to the regulatory role. And I will just talk about the key recommendations and highlight some of the observations that I hope you would consider in your discussion. Excuse me. So the objective of the paper was, like everybody else, it was actually to provide information to decision makers, present, past, and future. The role I looked at was, of course, it would have that people would have an opportunity to take a look at this information from a regulatory perspective, but also from the perspective of the individuals who are policymakers, decision makers within industries themselves. The assumptions under which I wrote was, and again, I found these assumptions quite basic, most of them almost truistic, but interesting in working both as somebody who's developed and operated safety management systems and then worked with regulators. It's interesting, particularly from a regulatory perspective, how sometimes we may forget the basic reasons that we are there in the first place. So I state the obvious. Basically, ultimately, at the end of the day, safety regulations are designed towards allowing and enabling the people who are responsible for managing risk to prevent accidents and manage risk optimally. That's the assumption under which this takes place. The notion of the accident causation, I went into it a little bit, probably not necessary for the group around this table, but perhaps for some of the people who will be reading this, and that was to emphasize the complexity of the systems that we operate in, that we regulate, and how nonlinear it might be. And therefore, if we're going to build safety management systems, how do we make sure that we have the right tools, techniques to manage risk proactively in a complex environment and measure the results? And that, of course, got explored in the paper. And again, you have to be in a regulatory environment to realize eventually how foundational the role of the regulator is in what the industry will do, especially in something like SMS. It didn't exist in most industries before, and it came in because of regulations. And as a consequence, when those regulations were introduced and how they were implemented, went a long way towards designing and ultimately creating safety management systems in any one particular industry. And again, the assumption I would make is if the goal of SMS is ultimately to reduce risk, excuse me, then it has to be, an SMS has to be explicitly associated with identifying hazards and managing risks and measuring the results of that. So those were the objectives and the assumptions on which the paper was based. These next two slides just really represent. So notionally, you can see by this, within the section 3, I think it was particularly, and then a little bit to section 4, I basically created typologies of safety management systems, which I had identified in different industries, and tried to show how there is a very wide variation of safety management systems in place, partly because my experience was in 2 transportation modes and in non-transport modes, and therefore I wanted to make sure I had a paper that could apply beyond that. So it enabled, by doing this, decision makers and policy makers to look at their systems and see what lessons could be learned, where they fit into that package, and could work from there. So very quickly, there's 4, as you might recall. Basically, the first one down there with very little performance aspects and very little risk base, it basically would be, in my view, a non-functioning safety management system. As you go towards a little more performance, a little bit more risk-based, mainly focused on the operations and technical aspects of a company, with a bit of system safety designed into the engineering aspects of it. As you go up into a more performance-based, it was tend to be more process-oriented, the safety management systems, as were the regulatory oversights of those. And ultimately, the maximum, what I consider optimal safety management system, is one that was fully integrated. The safety management system was hazard and risk-based. It was systemic. It had tools and techniques associated with integrating safety risk management into the rest of the enterprise risk management, as was explained by Dan. Actually, it's so nice to have Dan talk before me, because I can just say, like him, or don't agree with him, but that'll come later. Anyway, so this chart was not produced in the paper, so it'll just give you a general sense anyway. And I won't talk to it other than just to highlight a few features. So you can see in the left column as we go down, it was what I felt to be critical features. How do companies look at accidents and accident causations? Are the SMS rules actually integrated with the other regulations? Is SMS actually integrated with the company's management and business systems and strategic thinking? What's the focus of the SMS? How much and to what degree is there a proactive identification of hazards? How was SMS measured? How was the company's safety performance measured? And then there was just sort of this miscellaneous. So I'll just talk to column 1 and column 4. Basically, in the basic safety management systems that I found still existing in some of the transport industries, SMS existed because there was a regulation, and it really was just a check-off, and at the end of the day, it produced a non-functioning safety management system. In other words, you have the regulated term that there is an SMS required. What was it doing? It was just creating another regulation and was not actively helping the existing risk management, and sometimes was partially hindering it. All the way over to the other side where you have complete integrated performance, and again, these may not be the best labels, but anyway, from the point of view of those safety management systems and the regulatory programs that enabled them, you had an organizational model of performance, and safety was just one element of that performance. That the regulations for safety management system were integrated with the existing prescribed regulatory programs and other forms of programs. The safety management system worked as an umbrella. I've often used the analogy, this is supposed to be an umbrella, and you have, of course, all those things that are the structure of an umbrella, and they can be prescribed regulations, and then all that web that actually makes it work is the safety management system that fills in the parts between all that vertical sort of non-integrated regulations that exist in any one of the transport industries. Completely integrated with the company's strategic safety goals. The business management methods, planning methods are all integrated. And I'll keep moving because I can't see her yet, but I know we must be getting on towards that. Important things, measurement of tools. So the evaluation tools, there has to be more than just a standard inspection and an audit. There has to be a capability of being able to measure effectiveness and performance at the end of the day. So basically, as I said in my paper, if I was saying in my paper that I didn't think one should prescribe in a paper what regulators should do for sure for their safety management rules and regulations and for industry, and others that has to be customized, I chose not to write recommendations that was going to specify to policymakers and decision makers what their regulations should contain. So these were some suggested instead. Basically focus on the objectives. What is the objective for industry? What's the goal of industry of safety management system rules? And then what's the regulatory role? What's the regulatory objectives? Once you define that, you'll know what would work best within your industry, and you'll be able to build, hopefully, optimal regulations for SMS. And obviously the easy ones: plan, communicate, and engage the stakeholders. Do apply system safety concepts to enterprise risk. Leverage various methods like the financial institutes and insurance industries to help come to a systems approach to optimize the performance of a company's proactive safety management. Something that I really believe needs to take place is we need to align our terms, get consistency in what is a hazard, a risk, a system safety deficiency, a safety management system as opposed to a safety program, because if not, we're flutting around in circles. And even in this room, I'm sure with very well experienced, trained, involved, engaged safety professionals, we probably are speaking different languages on certain slides at certain times. And I think it's important that we get those resolved so that we can have the right concepts and plans. Some of the things I provoked you to talk about, if you could, this afternoon, and there's more than this in the paper itself, but anyway, just defining what is the system that needs to be measured, that needs to be defined in your safety management system. Is it within the company itself? Is it also with regards to the organizations that interact with it? And, excuse me, yes. So it's important from a regulatory perspective to define exactly what it is going to be system performance, safety management performance, and others. There is a need, obviously, I believe, to develop and refine the regulatory tools that we've used in the past and which we need in the future to be able to understand safety, SMS, and we need to manage safety management systems related data. Again, there was a lot of discussion on reporting programs, et cetera. There is existing in the organization right now, in any one organization, all sorts of information from which you could derive information about hazards, system deficiencies, i.e. the organizational factors behind it, the risks, and it's there. And right now it's not either being used or it's not being used to effect. So, and there's much more of that in the paper itself. And ultimately some of the challenges of SMS and how do we apply SMS to small service providers? Should we consider, as Dan has suggested, do we need an SMS for anything and everything? Or should we look at customizing, again, with the old goals of what are we trying to do as a regulator to reduce the risk or to help reduce the risks associated with a particular sector of an industry? And if it doesn't involve a safety management system, it may not. It could be just an enhanced safety program, and we should keep those objectives and goals in mind and create what's necessary. So just for some concluding thoughts, almost every SMS that exists right now in transport at this time was initiated or has certainly been severely shaped by regulations. So I think what we have to do as regulators is we have to keep that very much in mind, the responsibility that we take when we decide that we're going to regulate safety management systems of industry. We have to take account of what would work well, and we have to take account of how do we transition and implement this. These are random conclusions. Beware of rigidity. As I've watched SMS evolve over the years, it has become more and more process-oriented. It concerns me. We get to the stage, especially as regulators or also large companies like certainly offshore oil industry, which I recognized and watched, the process has become all important as opposed to what the processes were designed to be and to produce and to have effect. And consequently, again, you get very circular discussions that are talking all about the means and not the ends. And yet, of course, in our industries, you need processes. So it's a challenge that we face in the future. And I think it's one that maybe we can start the discussion today. I mentioned earlier, I really strongly suggest the need to take advantage of the data that already exists in any one company, in any one regulatory agency, using common definitions of system safety deficiencies and hazards. Look for what exists in your audit reports and your hazard reports and your incident reports. Those would be the incident reports that look for cause as opposed to who cares about cause. We should care about system deficiency and hazards that existed as a consequence or because we investigated that and use the information. So use the multiple data sources to their best advantage. It means you'll have quantitative, qualitative, objective, and subjective data that can be used to verify and validate the scope and existence of those. And don't spend so much time necessarily, therefore, on hazard reporting. I know this is getting controversial. I saw a little bit of it earlier before lunch. Reporting is one mechanism by which you can get information. There's many other ones. I did notice as I read papers and other things how SMS continues to be focusing on incidents and accidents. Incidents and accidents, that's reactive. That's looking in the rearview mirror and trying to understand what's taken place in the past and plan your future based on that. We have proactive tools. We can model and understand using data. We don't need the accident, we don't need the incident. Nothing against, obviously, the information that can be derived from incidents. And I guess one last thought, because Dan had a very powerful figure about data and the generator and using it for strategic. I invite you to go to page 48, figure 5.4 in my paper, where that has been employed, both with an operator and with a regulator. I want to emphasize this on the regulator, because the regulator has access to all sorts of data about what's working well and what's not working well in the industry. And they should be able to set the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year priorities based on collecting, amassing, and understanding that information in terms of where their priorities should be in different tools. And I just know, not too far. And that's all.
Okay.